The law office of Patterson and Associates occupied the top floor of a historic building in downtown Boulder, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the Flatirons. I sat in one of the leather chairs arranged around the conference table, watching my family file in like they were attending a coronation rather than a will reading. My brother Cameron entered first, wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000, his confidence filling the room before he did. He was 37, 4 years older than me, and had spent his entire life being told he was destined for greatness simply because he'd been born male and first. Mom followed, her arm linked through Cameron's like he was escorting her to a gala. My father had passed 2 years ago, and in the time since she'd transferred all her devotion to my brother, her perfect son, her pride and joy, her legacy. My sister Olivia came next, 28 and perpetually lost in Cameron's shadow. She offered me a small smile as she sat down, which was more than anyone else had done. I was Reese, 33 years old, middle child, the daughter who'd moved to Seattle for graduate school and never came back. The one who chose environmental law over the family's real estate development business. The disappointment. "Where's Aunt Patricia?" Mom asked, glancing at her watch. "The reading was supposed to start 10 minutes ago." "She called," said a voice from the doorway. "She won't be attending." James Patterson entered, carrying a leather portfolio. He was in his mid-50s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the careful neutrality of someone who'd spent decades mediating family disputes. "Why not?" Cameron demanded. "This is about her mother's estate. She should be here." "Miss Sullivan chose not to participate in the reading," James said diplomatically, settling into his chair at the head of the table. "She's already been informed of the relevant details. Now shall we begin?" "Finally," Cameron said, leaning back in his chair with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been denied anything. "Let's get this done. I have a meeting at 3. James opened his portfolio and pulled out several documents. "I'll start by reading the last will and testament of Eleanor Marie Sullivan, executed on March 15, 2019, and last updated on September 3, 2024. My grandmother. She'd passed away 6 weeks ago at 91, lucid and sharp until the very end. I'd flown in from Seattle and spent her last 3 days at her bedside, holding her hand and listening to her stories. Cameron had visited once for 45 minutes. Olivia had sent flowers. Mom had been too emotional to come to the hospital. The estate consists of several significant assets," James continued. "The primary residence in Boulder, valued at approximately $2.1 million. A cabin in Estes Park, valued at $800,000. Investment portfolio worth approximately $750,000. And a small commercial property in downtown Boulder currently leased to a bookstore, valued at approximately $150,000. I watched Cameron doing the math, his eyes gleaming. 3.8 million. Maybe more. "The will itself is quite straightforward," James said. "Eleanor left $10,000 each to several charitable organizations. She left her jewelry collection to her daughter Patricia. And she left $50,000 to her granddaughter Olivia, along with her collection of first edition books." Olivia's eyes widened. "Really? The books?" "Yes," James confirmed. "Your grandmother noted that you were the only one who'd ever shown interest in them." "What about the rest?" Cameron interrupted. "The properties, the investments, that's where the real value is." James looked at him for a long moment. "Your grandmother's will states that all remaining assets are to be distributed according to the terms of the Eleanor M. Sullivan Revocable Living Trust, established in January 2020. "Right," Cameron said impatiently. "And as her eldest grandson and the only male heir from her daughter's side, that obviously comes to me. It's tradition. It's how these things work." "Actually," James started, but Cameron cut him off. "Look, I don't mean to be indelicate, but we all know Grandma was old-fashioned about these things. Eldest son inherits. That's how it worked in her generation, and I know she respected that. Hell, she told me herself when I was 20 that I'd be responsible for carrying on the family legacy." Mom nodded vigorously. "Eleanor always valued family tradition. Cameron is the logical choice to manage the estate. He has business experience, financial acumen, and the stability to handle properties worth this much. Plus," Cameron added, turning to look at me for the first time, "Reese lives in Seattle. She's barely been back to Colorado in the last decade. Olivia's still finding herself. I'm the one who's established here, who understands the local market, who can properly manage these assets. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded on the table in front of me. I'd learned long ago that silence was often more powerful than argument. Mr. Patterson, Cameron said, his tone shifting to the one he used when closing business deals. I assume you have the trust documents prepared for transfer? I'd like to get started on the property assessments as soon as possible. The Boulder market is hot right now, and I'm thinking we could renovate the main house, potentially split the Estes Park lot, really maximize value. I asked quietly. Cameron glanced at me. The estate. Don't worry, I'll make sure everything is handled properly. You'll be kept informed of major decisions. How generous, I said. He missed the sarcasm entirely. I know this might be disappointing, Reese, but you have to understand, this is about what's best for the family legacy. You've made your choices, built your life in Seattle. This is mine. James cleared his throat. Mr. Sullivan, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? Mom asked sharply. The trust, James said carefully, does not distribute assets to the eldest grandson. Cameron's confident smile faltered. What do you mean? Then who, Olivia? Did Grandma split it between us? No, James said. The trust is quite specific. All properties, investments, and remaining assets transfer to a single beneficiary. Who? Cameron demanded. James looked directly at me. Reese Eleanor Sullivan. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Cameron laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. That's ridiculous. There must be a mistake. There's no mistake, James said. The trust was established in January 2020 and has been managed by myself and Eleanor's financial advisor, Margaret Chin, for the past 4 years. All assets were formally transferred into the trust at that time, with Reese named as the sole beneficiary. But that's impossible, Mom said, her voice rising. Eleanor would never cut out her grandson, her male heir. Mrs. Sullivan, James interrupted gently, Eleanor didn't cut anyone out. She made a deliberate choice about who would receive her estate. And she chose Reese. Cameron's face had gone from pale to red. This is insane. Reese doesn't even live here. She left Colorado, abandoned the family. I moved for graduate school, I said quietly. That's not abandonment. You chose Seattle over family, Cameron snapped. You chose your career over being here when we needed you. And now you're being rewarded for it? How does that make any sense? Perhaps, James said, his tone cooling, we should review the letter your grandmother left explaining her decision. There's a letter? Olivia asked. James pulled out an envelope and opened it. Eleanor wanted this read at the will reading to avoid any confusion. She was quite clear about her reasoning. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. To my family gathered for the reading of my will. I know my decisions regarding the trust will come as a surprise to some of you, so I want to explain my thinking while I still have the clarity to do so. I have 3 grandchildren. I love all of them. But love and trust are not the same thing, and neither is the same as respect. Cameron, you are intelligent and capable, but you have spent your life expecting the world to arrange itself for your convenience. You visited me 4 times in the last year of my life, always when you wanted something. Advice on a business deal, an introduction to one of my contacts, permission to use my name on a development project. You never asked how I was doing. You never asked about my life. You assumed that because you're the eldest grandson, my legacy would automatically flow to you like inheritance law from a century ago. Olivia, you are kind and creative, but you have allowed yourself to live in Cameron's shadow. You have potential you've never explored because you've been told it doesn't matter as much as your brother's ambitions. I hope the books and the financial cushion I've left you will help you find your own path. Reese, you left Colorado, and for that your mother and brother have never forgiven you. But I watched you leave to become yourself rather than the version of yourself they wanted. You called me every Sunday for 12 years. You flew in every few months just to have lunch. You helped me set up my email so we could send photos. You listened to my stories about your grandfather even though you'd heard them 100 times. You never asked me for money or favors or connections. You loved me for who I was, not what I had. That's why the estate goes to you. Not because you're more deserving, but because you're the only one who loved me without calculation. And because I trust you to honor my actual wishes, Not the wishes you've projected onto me. Do what you want with the properties, Reese. Sell them, keep them, burn them down if it makes you happy. They're yours free and clear. You've earned them by being the only person in this family who saw me as a person instead of a bank account. With love and hope for all of you, Eleanor. The silence after James finished reading was suffocating. Then Cameron exploded. That's complete bullshit. She was 91 years old, obviously manipulated. Mr. Sullivan, James said sharply, I'll stop you right there. Your grandmother underwent a full cognitive evaluation by Dr. Robert Harrison, one of Colorado's leading geriatric psychiatrists, in December 2023, just 10 months ago. She was found to be of completely sound mind with no evidence of dementia, undue influence or diminished capacity. Those findings are documented and sealed with the court. Then Reese manipulated her, Cameron said, pointing at me. She isolated Grandma, poisoned her against us. I lived in Seattle, I said calmly. How exactly did I isolate her? Phone calls, visits, whatever you did, you turned her against her own family. Cameron, stop, Olivia said quietly. Just stop. Stay out of this, he snapped. No, Olivia said more firmly. Reese is right. He called Grandma every week. I know because Grandma told me. She'd say, Reese called today, we talked for an hour. When was the last time you talked to Grandma for an hour about anything other than business? Cameron's jaw clenched. I was busy building a career, managing responsibilities. We were all busy, Olivia interrupted. But Reese made time. And now we're mad at her for it? That's insane. Mom stood abruptly. This is unacceptable. James, I want to contest this trust. On grounds of undue influence, diminished capacity, whatever we need to claim. Cameron is the rightful heir. Mrs. Sullivan, sit down, James said, his voice hard now. You can contest whatever you want, but you will lose and you will waste a lot of money in the process. Eleanor anticipated challenges. He prepared for them. Every single document is ironclad. I don't care, Mom said. I will not let my daughter steal my son's inheritance. It was never his inheritance. I said, my patience finally snapping. It was Grandma's property, Grandma's money, Grandma's choice. Cameron doesn't have a right to it just because he was born first and male. That's exactly what gives him the right, Mom shot back. Tradition, family structure, the natural order. There is no natural order. I stood up, facing her across the table. There's just people making choices about who they want to give their assets to. And Grandma chose me. She didn't choose Cameron because he's a man. She didn't choose him because he's older. She chose me because I actually loved her. We all loved her, Cameron said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Did you? I asked. Because love isn't just showing up to family holidays. It's not calling when you need something. It's being there when you're not needed, when there's nothing to gain just because you care. I pulled out my phone and opened my photos. This is Grandma and me at the Botanical Gardens last summer. I flew in for 4 days just to go to the summer concert series with her because she mentioned she wished she had someone to go with. This one is from her 90th birthday party that I organized because everyone else was too busy. This is us at Christmas 2 years ago, making her grandmother's sugar cookie recipe. The one she taught me because I was the only one who asked. I scrolled through dozens of photos. Evidence of a relationship my family knew nothing about. This is from March when she had that bout of pneumonia, I continued. I worked remotely from her house for 2 weeks to make sure she took her medications and had someone there if she needed anything. Where were you, Cameron? Oh right, closing that development deal in Denver. Too important to take time off for your grandmother. I visited her in the hospital, Cameron protested weakly. Once, I said. For 45 minutes. I was there every day for 3 weeks. James cleared his throat. If I may continue with the trust documentation, there are several other provisions we need to review. What other provisions? Cameron asked suspiciously. Your grandmother included detailed instructions for the management and disposition of certain assets, James said, pulling out another document. Specifically, she wanted to address the commercial property downtown, the one leased to the bookstore. What about it? I asked. She wanted you to know that the bookstore owner, Mrs. Helen Park, has been there for 38 years. The lease is significantly below market rate because your grandmother believed in supporting local independent businesses. She hoped you would continue that tradition, but the choice is yours. I felt tears prick my eyes. Of course Grandma had thought about Helen. That was exactly like her. She also, James continued, wanted to address certain financial irregularities she discovered in the year before she passed. The room went silent. What irregularities? Mom asked, her voice suddenly cautious. James pulled out a thick folder. In June 2023, Eleanor hired a forensic accountant to review the financial statements from her investment portfolio. She'd noticed some discrepancies and wanted them investigated. Cameron had gone very still. The accountant discovered that over a period of 6 years, approximately $340,000 had been withdrawn from Eleanor's investment accounts without her authorization. The withdrawals were made using power of attorney documents that Eleanor had granted to her daughter, Patricia, for emergency purposes. Aunt Patricia stole from Grandma? Olivia asked, shocked. Not Patricia, James said quietly. The withdrawals were made from Patricia's account, but the investigation revealed that Cameron had access to that account and made the transfers himself. The words hung in the air like smoke. That's a lie, Cameron said, but his voice shook. It's documented, James replied, opening the folder. Bank records, transfer authorizations, even recorded phone calls to the investment firm requesting the transfers. Your grandmother chose not to pursue criminal charges, but she did require full restitution. You've been making monthly payments of $5,000 for the past 18 months. I stared at my brother. You stole from Grandma? It wasn't stealing, Cameron said desperately. I borrowed against my future inheritance. I was going to pay it back. You were already paying it back, James corrected, because Eleanor caught you. The forensic accountant estimated that if she hadn't discovered the withdrawals, you would have taken another $200,000 before she passed. Mom had sunk back into her chair, her face ashen. This is why she cut me out, Cameron said, the realization hitting him. Not because Reese was more deserving. Because I stole from her. No, I said quietly. She cut you out because you saw her as a resource to exploit. The theft was just proof of that. If you'd loved her, if you'd respected her, you never would have taken the money in the first place. Cameron looked at me, and for the first time in my life I saw him without the confidence, without the entitlement, without the armor of being the golden child. He just looked tired and small and lost. What happens now? He asked. Now, James said, we complete the trust transfer. Reese will need to sign several documents taking ownership of the properties and investments. The remaining balance of Cameron's restitution, approximately $47,000, will be paid to Reese as the estate beneficiary. I can't afford that, Cameron said. I've been barely making the $5,000 payments as it is. Then I suggest you contact Reese directly to negotiate terms, James said. That's between the two of you now. Cameron looked at me, something like desperation in his eyes. Reese, please. I made mistakes, I know that, but we're family. Can't we work something out? What kind of something? I asked. Let me buy the Estes Park cabin, he said quickly. I'll pay market value, maybe even above market. That's $800,000. Enough that you'd still have plenty, and I'd have something from Grandma's estate. Something to remember her by. I looked at my brother, at his hopeful expression, and realized he still didn't get it. You want to remember her? I asked. Then remember the woman who took you to Rocky's games when you were 8. Remember the grandmother who taught you to fish at that cabin you now want to buy. Remember the person who loved you despite your flaws and gave you 6 years to make things right after you stole from her. I do remember, he protested. No, I said. You remember what she could give you. That's not the same thing. I turned to James. What were Grandma's specific wishes for the properties? James consulted his notes. She hoped you'd keep the main house in the family, but understood if you chose to sell. The cabin, she wanted that to remain a place of peace. She specifically noted that it should never be developed or split. The commercial property, she hoped you'd continue supporting Helen's bookstore. And the investments, she trusted your judgment completely. I nodded slowly. Then that's what I'll do. I'll keep the house. I might move back to Colorado actually. I've been thinking about it. The Seattle office has been pushing for me to open a Denver branch anyway. The cabin stays exactly as it is. No development, no sales. It'll be there if anyone in the family wants to use it respectfully. And Helen keeps her lease at the current rate. What about me? Cameron asked. The restitution payments. Keep paying the $5,000 a month, I said. I won't pursue the full balance immediately, but miss a payment and we renegotiate. With lawyers. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't destruction either. It was exactly what Grandma would have wanted. Accountability with compassion. Mrs. Sullivan, James said, turning to my mother, do you have any questions about the trust distribution? Mom looked at me for a long moment. I couldn't read her expression. Anger, disappointment, maybe something like grudging respect. No questions, she said finally. I think Eleanor made her position quite clear. We spent the next hour signing documents. James explained tax implications, transfer procedures, property management details. Cameron sat in silence, staring at the table. Olivia occasionally reached over to squeeze my hand. Finally it was done. The estate was mine. $3.8 million in assets because I'd loved my grandmother and called her every Sunday. As we filed out of the conference room, Olivia caught my arm. I meant what I said in there. You deserved this. And I'm sorry we made you feel like you didn't belong. Thanks, Liv, I said. For what it's worth, the book collection Grandma left you. Some of those first editions are worth serious money. She knew you'd appreciate them, but she also wanted to make sure you had options. Olivia's eyes widened. Really? Really? Call me next week. I'll help you get them properly appraised. And if you want to use some of that money to finally go back to school for that literature degree you've always talked about, do it. Grandma would want that. She hugged me tightly. Thank you. For being better than the rest of us. Cameron waited by the elevators, his expensive suit suddenly looking like costume rather than armor. Reese, don't, I said. Not here, not now. You need to figure out why you did what you did. Really figure it out. And then maybe we can talk. Will we? He asked. Talk, I mean. Eventually. I considered this. Maybe. If you're willing to have an honest conversation. If you're willing to admit that the world doesn't owe you anything just because you're the eldest son. If you can see me as your sister instead of an obstacle to what you think should be yours. I can try, he said. Then try, I replied. I'll be around. I'm keeping the house, remember. His expression flickered. Surprise, maybe disappointment that I wasn't selling. You're really moving back? I think so, I said. Grandma's house is too perfect to leave empty. And besides, someone needs to make sure that garden gets planted every spring. The elevator arrived. Cameron stepped in, but Mom held back. Reese, she said, her voice formal and controlled. Your grandmother obviously trusted you. I hope you prove worthy of that trust. It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of how she'd treated me. But it was something. I'll do my best, I said. That's all anyone can do. She nodded and joined Cameron in the elevator. I watched the doors close, then turned to find James gathering his files. That went better than I expected, he said. I've seen families completely implode over far less money. It's not about the money, I said. It never was. Eleanor knew that, James replied. That's why she chose you. She told me once that you were the only one who'd ever asked about her life before she became a grandmother. The only one who cared about her stories. I smiled, remembering. She had great stories. Did she ever tell you about teaching herself to code in the 1960s so she could work as a programmer? She did, James said. She was remarkable. I'm glad her legacy is in good hands. I left the office and walked out into the Boulder sunshine. The Flatirons rose in the distance, solid and eternal. Somewhere in the city, Grandma's house waited. My house now, with its garden and its memories and its proof that love without conditions was the only legacy that mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from my girlfriend, Sarah, who was waiting at a coffee shop nearby. How'd it go? I typed back, I'll tell you everything. But short version. I just inherited $3.8 million because I loved my grandma and called her every Sunday. That's the most you thing I've ever heard. Proud of you. Coffee's waiting. I walked toward the coffee shop, toward Sarah, toward the future I'd build in this city I'd once left. Behind me, the law office held the fragments of my family's illusions. The belief that inheritance was owed, that love could be inherited like property, that being born first and male meant the world would arrange itself in your favor. Grandma had spent 91 years learning what mattered and 4 years ensuring that lessons survived her. She'd given me more than houses and investments. She'd given me validation that choosing authenticity over approval was always the right choice. The eldest son had claimed the estate. But the granddaughter who'd actually loved the grandmother? She'd already owned it for 4 years. All that was left was the paperwork. And watching my brother's face turn white when he realized that tradition and entitlement were no match for genuine love and Sunday phone calls. The will had been read. The truth had been spoken. And the family hierarchy that had existed for generations had finally, irrevocably, been dismantled. One trust document at a time.